Hi, and welcome to Videos.org. This week we're talking to Dr. Vigne on his recent work on the leopard cats in China. So, Dr. Vigne, if you'd like to explain your work.
Thank you very much. Good morning. So I began the research on early domestication of cats in 2004 with the discovery of a complete skeleton of cat in a human burial in Cyprus. As there were no ancestor of cat in Cyprus, this meant that human brought cat to the island, and in addition that they put them in the burial. That means that they were tightly associated with human at that time already, and this burial was dated around 7000 BC. This meant that human already began to intensify its relationship with cat at that time, and we suspected that this was because of the beginning of agriculture, because the beginning of agriculture provoked in the small Neolithic villages the accumulation of cereals, and these cereals attracted mice, and these mice themselves attracted cats. This hypothesis was strengthened by what have been found in Egypt for more recent periods, around 3500 BC. My colleagues found also the beginning of the intensification of cats with the beginning of agriculture. So we suspected a kind of process like that, and we wanted to know if there were other areas in the world where similar processes can have begun with small felids. When I began to work in China in 2010, my Chinese colleagues from the Chinese Academy of Social Science and Chinese Academy of Science told me, "Oh, you are the specialist of cat. We will show you some cat remains which have been found in the Neolithic villages in China," and they showed me a complete skeleton of cats which have been found in a burial, in a pit, probably in connection with burials, and also a series of small bones of cats which have been found in different archaeological contexts, dating to around 3500 BC, 3000 BC. And the problem was, of course, there were something between cat and humans in these Neolithic villages, but the problem was to know if the cats were local species of Chinese cats, which have experienced a similar process in the Chinese villages to the process that were found in West Asia, or if these cats were the results of introduction of early domestic cats coming from West Asia. And the question was really interesting because we know that the contact between East and West Asia began approximately around the beginning of the Silk Road, that is to say during the Roman time, with the relationship between the Han Dynasty and the Roman Empire. And we thought that if there were contacts between, if there were transportation of cats, should have been much earlier than these days. So the question was important. And the problem was that it's really very difficult to differentiate the bones of small felids of different species. There are at least 4 different small felid species in China, and it was really difficult to differentiate them because the morphology of all these small felids is very, very similar. So there were 2 different ways to do it, either trying to find ancient DNA in these bones, or look at the morphology with very efficient and cutting-edge techniques, such as geometric morphometrics. Some of the bones were not very well preserved, and so we decided not to try ancient DNA, but rather to use geometric morphometrics, which is a cheaper technique and a technique which can be applied to a lot of different specimens. We had not a lot, but we had several, and we wanted to test all of them. So we applied this technique together with my colleague Alowen Evin and Thomas Cookie, were working in my group at that time in connection with the Aberdeen University and Keith Dobney, and we found that all the mandibles of these small felids of the Neolithic Chinese villages were not of the Western wildcat species, but were of the leopard cat, which is a small felid which lives in East Asia and Southeast Asia still today. So we had the solution finally, because they were not domestic cats from West Asia transported to the East, but they were local cats. Now it was interesting to have more precisions about the relationship between humans and these cats in the Neolithic villages. And it's not easy because we have a small number of remains, but we have three different lines of evidence for discussing this relationship between human and cat in these Neolithic villages. The first one was this complete skeleton buried probably in a funerary environment, which meant that probably there were special relationship with humans. The second line was that all these cat mandibles were a little bit smaller than in size than the mandibles of wild leopard cat in China, and a small size is of incipient domestication. And the third line of evidence was only one mandible, but a very strange mandible with a very high level of attrition of the teeth, which suggests that these animals were living very old in the wild. So old individuals cannot really fed with mice. So we can suspect that this individual have been fed by humans. So it's not a clear and definitive evidence for domestication, but it's probably a series of small, weak evidences which altogether suggest that something happened between humans and cats already at that time in China. The last point of our discovery is that this leopard cat has been domesticated very recently in the 60s and crossed with the domestic cat for making this fantastic and splendid breed of cat, that you know, probably the Bengali cat, and so this means that our hypothesis of tight relationship between human and cat and beginning of taming of cat at that period is not incompatible with what we know on the biology of this leopard cat and on its putative relationship with humans. So, of course, this is an initial research. We have now to investigate. First, we have to increase the number of specimens. We have to investigate the phenomenon more into detail, especially with a lot of different archaeological sites. And overall, we have to investigate the relationship between these leopard cats and humans in China, not only at the end and middle of the Neolithic, but before, starting from what time this relationship began, and also after. And the second question after is very exciting, because we know that the earliest domestic cats which have been living with humans in the Han Dynasty in China were Western cats. So they were not this leopard cat. So something happened between the beginning of Bronze Age, and the Han Dynasty, that is to say 2-3 centuries before Christ. And in this period, something happened, and probably there were a replacement of the local, more or less domesticated cat and the Western Asian cat, which have been introduced through the Silk Road or earlier, before the first beginning of these contacts between East and West Asia. That's it.
That was great, thank you. It was really interesting to hear about the Bengal cats, because I knew a bit about them sort of like being around nowadays. Just a few quick questions. You're saying about the burials. Would this sort of symbolize, you know, how the ancient Egyptians buried them sort of almost in a religious context? Is this burial of the cat, is it suggesting a religious sort of relationship, or is it purely they feel emotion for the cat, so they're burying it because it's like a pet, like we would nowadays?
No, there are two different aspects. There are a series of observation of burial of cats with humans or in the funerary environment. This is the case in Cyprus, and this is probably the case in some sites in China. In Egypt, it's something a little bit different, because it's not burial with humans, but it's probably religious deposits. You know, everybody knows the Bastet goddess, and this fantastic religious movement during the last millennia during the classical dynasties of Egypt. And this began very early, probably during the 4th millennium BC, which is exactly the date when we begin to find some skeletons of cats buried in sacrificial religious contexts. So this is something that it's clear and very well developed in Egypt, and that we have not really found in other areas. In the Near East or in East Asia. So there is something around the symbolic image of cats in a lot of different civilizations through the world.
And a question about the attrition. So is this suggesting that they are eating the mice and the rodents that are around the settlement, or is it a case of the humans are giving them the mice and they're also giving them other scraps, and that's leading to the attrition, or is it a combination of all of those aspects?
You know, a lot of process of domestication at the very beginning, during the Neolithic or even just before the Neolithic, are intensification of already existing relationship, ecological relationship between humans and some animals. Domestication is not a simple decision of humans. It's first already existing relationship with the animals, and humans finally at any time decides that it's something interesting, and there is an intentionality of human then which transforms this ecological relationship into a true domestication. For cats, it's clear that cats are commensal, that is to say that they are, for some species at least, they are already naturally ready to enter the villages and eat these mice. If you have an accumulation of food, like proliferation of mice in a village, they will come. They will come without any intentionality of humans, and they will eat. But they are the perfect carnivore to involve in the villager life, because they are not eating anything else. They will not eat crops or cereals or nothing else. They just will eat mice, and they are very discreet. They will not. They are very. They are afraid of humans, so they will not be dangerous in the village. So I think that cats have been the ideal animal for fighting this pest already at the very beginning of the Neolithic, and in several different regions of the world.
So they're fulfilling a role that's almost perfect for them, kind of thing,
Yes.
rather than us encouraging them into the houses. My last question was this morphological approach you have with the mandibles. Can that be applied to other creatures, or is this something that can only work on cats?
No. This you mean the technique of geometric morphometrics that we apply to cats? Yes, it's a technique which is known in biology since a very long time, probably during the 60s or 70s of the last century. And it is now more and more frequently applied to archaeological, bioarchaeological remains, either plants or animals, in order to differentiate very similar species. The classical techniques of morphology are limited to very different morphotypes. But when you have very similar species, it's necessary to go into the detail of the morphology, which cannot be investigated in another way than geometric morphometrics. So this is a technique which has been applied to wild boar, early domestic wild boar, to dogs and to cats. I think it's the first time that we apply it to archaeological remains of cats.
Wow, that's fascinating. Thank you so much for the interview. I always love hearing more about cats, so it's been great. Thank you very much. We'll put a link to the paper below the interview.
Sorry?
I will put a link to the paper below the interview so everyone can read.
Okay.
Thank you again.
Thank
Bye.
you. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.